You are listening to the Keto Answers podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Gustin, and joining me this week is Diane Sanfilippo. Diane has been one of the queens of paleo and the whole paleo movement over the last 10, 15 years. And she is opening up that, she's been on keto or used keto as a tool the whole time, and just now starting to get into that with her new book, Keto QuickStart. And so we dug into her history with this, how she does not like the associated dogma with both paleo keto, nor do I, and all the tips and tools that she has gathered, which is one of her strong suits, is really taking her information and her knowledge and distilling in such helpful, useful tidbits that people can take. In these books has been an incredible strength of hers. So it's kind of par for the course with Keto QuickStart, which we dive into. And so without further ado, here's my conversation with Diane Sanfilippo. Before we get to the episode, I wanted to chat about our sponsor, Perfect Keto. Perfect Keto is all about making a ketogenic diet healthy and accessible. Whether you're reading all of our online guides or articles or enjoying Perfect Keto's exogenous ketones or any other keto-friendly products, everything you need to make keto work for you is at perfectketo.com. I know what you're thinking. Hey, aren't you the founder of Perfect Keto? Yep, that's right. And all of my insanely high standards have been put into making each and every product. My background as a functional medicine clinician helps me craft the cleanest and healthiest possible products and the best information about a ketogenic diet. Head on over to perfectketo.com to learn anything you need to know about the ketogenic diet. And if you've never tried any of our products before, feel free to use the code KETOPODCAST for 20% off your first order. With that being said, let's get into the show. Diane, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. So you have been a busy person for a very long time. Just give people a little bit of a background if they're not familiar with your work on all the stuff that you've done. I think that first thing you hit.
We don't have that much time, Anthony.
Maybe the highlights then of the hit list of the last couple, 10, 12, 15
almost
years.
Decade. Yeah. So most people know me best as the author of Practical Paleo. It's I would think it's a single best-selling book on the paleo diet that's out there. It sold more than 500,000 copies, and it's just, people call it the Paleo Bible, which I'm honored. I think that's awesome. And so that's how most people know me. I actually created the 21-day Sugar Detox before I wrote Practical Paleo, but I wrote Practical Paleo first and then published the 21-day Sugar Detox, which is now a 3-book series. And the first of those also New York Times bestseller. So that's kind of where most people know a lot of what I've done. But also very early on before I wrote Practical Paleo and sort of as I was writing it, actually, I was teaching nutrition seminars in CrossFit gyms. So on the heels of Rob Wolf, who is definitely a mentor to me, sort of from afar, sort of from close up, he was very quick to be like, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but do the thing, But I was traveling the country teaching seminars about paleo and just nutrition in general at CrossFit gyms for probably at least 3 years. I met thousands of people doing that, and I definitely saw the need for a type of education that's really practical in terms of talking to people about how food works in the body, pretty dogma-free. Even though I was teaching paleo, I was like, rice isn't going to kill you. It's not about that. It's like, if you're not feeling great, if what you're doing isn't working for you, here's another way to do things. And so I think people just grew to find me as a safe space to talk about options with nutrition, because I wasn't going to tell them that, eating this thing or this thing is wrong. It's just, here's a way to approach things if you're not getting results. So that's kind of the background. I'm a certified nutrition consultant. It's something that I went to school for after undergrad, and after doing other things, studying graphic design, I just had this real passion for nutrition. And what actually started my passion for nutrition was really cooking. I grew up cooking with my family. My dad's Italian, Sanfilippo. My mom thinks she's Italian. She used to cook a lot of Italian food. People joke like, oh, did you learn how to cook from your Italian mom? I'm like, my mom's not Italian. She is definitely a German Jew. She did not teach me really how to cook, but definitely my dad. But growing up learning how to cook, it was really about the food. And I actually started a meal business back in 2007, 2008. I was a little ahead of my time on this thing. Now there's tons of meals, CrossFit gyms and really healthy, like paleo, keto, all of that. But it was called Balanced Bites because I was balancing people's meals to different macro needs, whether they needed more protein, more carb, less carb, more fat, et cetera. And so the name of my blog and my podcast, Spice Company Food, all that stuff, Balanced Bites really came from that. And so that was actually my real foundation was I was super into getting food balanced for different people. And more specifically at the time, athletes and myself. I was training pretty hard just for life. And so that was the real foundation. And then I hit a point where I didn't want to do the work for people anymore, making the meals. I was like, I don't know, I'm burning out and I don't feel like I'm teaching people anything. And so that's when I went back to school for nutrition. So that's kind of like the deep, way, way back machine on it. And then when I went back to school to study nutrition, then kind of spurred into working with clients, teaching seminars, writing books, et cetera. And now here we are.
Right. And I think you touched on a lot of different things here, but obviously super successful with the books, and we have a new one coming out soon that we'll talk about, obviously, but not only that, but the podcast, the blog, the online programs, you have these incredible spices now. And you've ran in a lot of different directions and sprinted. Yeah. I mean, I've kind of done the same thing in the last 5, 6, 7 years as well. Yeah. What is a thing that is like the relentless pursuit for you, and what keeps you driving to go in all these different directions?
I think it's really fun. I think it's so fun to create things and see them come to life and have them land in people's lives, and whether it's a cookbook, I think I get the most feeling of reward and satisfaction when someone says, like, my dad got off of his heart medication because I shared Practical Paleo with him. Or, I didn't know how to cook at all, and I got Practical Paleo, which, I keep it really simple. I do not make fancy food for people. It's very basic. I try to keep the ingredients, list as small as possible. Sometimes there's a lot of spices, but that doesn't really count. But I think it's that. I think it's just this idea of like touching people's lives in a certain way. And I think it's so cool when people show up to a book signing to learn about health. And I look at the room and I'm like, there's a lot of people out there who would show up for a movie star. I almost said a name of like an internet famous family. I won't say because I'm actually a fan, but it's just like some people show up for that kind of thing. They fangirl over that type of thing. And I just think it's so cool that people are interested in bettering their own lives, becoming healthier, and empowering themselves. And I'm just doing the things that I find exciting and fun and interesting. And if that's going to inspire someone to better their own life, I'm like, sweet, I'll do it. Yeah. Okay. Let me try that. And I don't know. I do feel spread thinly sometimes, but at the same time, I don't think I could have it any other way. I've literally never had just one job. So
yeah, I think that, you and I have the same blessing / curse in that regard.
Yes.
And even you've gone as far as, and I had a time when I did this as well a lot, but helping other people with creating businesses that do the same thing. And there's a point too where I thought, I can only go so far, even if I started 10 different businesses of helping other people reclaim their health and be on this journey. And so kudos to that. That's also a huge part of it as well. And I think that, you're one of the people who certainly walks the talk. That's for sure.
Thank you. And I don't really have hobbies. They always become a business because I'm like, can't that be a business? Why is that just a hobby? It's just, that's just always how I've been since I'm a kid. So,
right. And then as far as going back to how you said you cook super simply, I know you had a book as well, the Mediterranean Paleo cooking, and that's something that the style of cooking is it something that has been more of a tenet now that you're moving forward? And can you just maybe touch on that as far as how you approach cooking now?
Yeah, that was actually a book that I co-authored with my friends Caitlin Weeks and her husband Nabil Boumrar. So he is a chef trained here in the States, but he is originally from Algeria, North Africa, and it's a really interesting story, but she and I were both in school to become nutrition consultants. We became friends here in San Francisco. She's still one of my best friends today. Love her. She's just like salt of the earth. Both of them are just such awesome people. But anyway, she had written it as an ebook. And when she had a health crash, she came down with, but like basically was diagnosed with Hashimoto's after dieting extremely for a while and really didn't know how to cook. And so her husband taught her all these amazing recipes, made them gluten-free, paleo, etc. And they made an ebook. And of course, so touching on what you just were talking about with like how we maybe can't help but help our friends with their businesses. I basically said to her, like, I think this should be a real book. And I think your food is awesome because I ate at their house. And I was like, I don't cook food like this. And I know that she's not doing anything complicated because she's that kind of person where she's like, this better be easy. So when I tasted the food, I was like, this should be a real book. Can I help you? I would love to take the pictures and like help design this book. And so I really was kind of like consulting on how to approach sharing the information in the book, but the recipes were all theirs 100%. And I just was like that obnoxious friend. It was like, we need to make this into a book. I'm really proud of that book artistically. I mean, I just was proud of the photos and everything. Yeah. And the food is amazing. Definitely.
Has that influenced how you cook at all, going through that process and learning?
A bit, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely started introducing different flavors, but the core of the way that I cook, it's like onions and garlic. Like everything starts with onions and garlic, and people are always like, "Can you make a spice blend without garlic?" And I said, "No, like, I probably can't." Because that just would be against everything I believe in. I'm sort of kidding, but my recipes, I do try to take influences from different types of cuisine just to keep it interesting. But I did definitely learn some different flavor profiles for sure when we were working on that book. The cinnamon, cumin, paprika, that's kind of like the trifecta of flavors that they use a lot, and really delicious. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things. So whenever I cook for people, they go, holy shit, like why is this so good? Like what is going on here? And it's like, well, yeah, I just cooked onions and garlic for a long time.
Yep.
And I added everything else and then reduced to sauce and used fresh food. And I think those are the keys for me, at least. That's how I cheat.
Like amazing spices and then herbs. And it's not that hard, but I do think that people mostly under-season their food. I talk about that a bunch when I am introducing people to my spice blends. I'm like, listen, you guys, I know you think just a little sprinkle is enough, but you need to season your food liberally. And it's not about the spices not being potent. They're potent, but if you want your food to taste really good, you actually have to season it, and especially salt. I mean, people undersalt their food all the time. And I'm like, I can't control if your food is bland, even if you made my recipe, because it'll tell you to salt it to taste. I'm like, I can't do that for you. So you really do have to get used to salting food as you're cooking it along the way. I think that's the really big trick. I definitely did not learn that from my mother. She was not good at salting food along the way. So we would always be like piling on the cheese at the end. This was the Italian family. We always had grated Parmesan or Romano cheese on the table. And I was like, okay, I'll just toss a bunch of cheese on top.
So your viewpoint on adding spices to food and needing to do that a lot, is that why your spices are big enough to knock someone out if you hit them in the head with it? Like when I first got them, I was expecting like the traditional style that you get at like a Whole Foods or whatever, a couple ounces. Yours are like, can fit 3 of them in my cupboard because they're so giant.
They're like 2 to 3 times the average size.
Yeah, I love it.
Honestly, I like it because for me, it's about bringing spice blends to people who really cook a lot. And I know in our worlds, when we're getting people eating more real food, cooking at home, don't be shy with it. Add a bunch, but also I want to encourage people to use them and to really be cooking more. And sometimes I feel like smaller bottles are a bit precious and people don't want to go all in and kind of use them. But it was just a little bit of, I don't know, there's this brand, Eden Foods, they make a sesame seed or a gomasio. And I just really liked that jar. I don't know what it was. I was like, I'm obsessed with this bottle and I want my spices in these big bottles. And we will probably have some more, quote, traditional sized ones in the future. And I have some stuff that will probably be available on the website when this episode goes live that are a little bit smaller and people can maybe pull the trigger. I know some folks are like, well, that seems expensive. I'm like, it only seems that way because you're actually getting 2 to 3 times what you thought you were getting. But I just like that idea. I don't know. I like for people to have a good amount of this stuff on hand. I mean, you shake some, bagel blend on stuff, you shake some super garlic. I mean, your food is going to taste amazing.
Yeah, I like the coffee BBQ one personally a lot, and then smoking. I have a Traeger grill now that I actually have somewhere to put something. I moved to Texas, and yeah, they're awesome. So obviously, thank you for making those. And we chatted a little bit before we started recording about how, you've been known for the whole paleo thing for a long period of time. Now starting to inch a little bit more towards being public about keto diet, but you haven't, like you said before, you've been doing keto for a very long period of time, but now it's just starting to come out. What has that transition been like for you from kind of being known as paleo? I know that you said you were in a very non-dogmatic position about it, and I mean, even through your website being called Balanced Bites is a really good stand on that. But I mean, how has that transition been from either people asking you about paleo to keto and the explosion of keto in the last 2 years?
So a lot of people are like, wait, now you're switching?
Right.
I mean, it really confuses people because people want to put you in a box and they want you to be labeled. And the type of personality that I have is I'm super resistant to those labels no matter what. I didn't even want to write, when I wrote Practical Paleo, I didn't want to call it Practical Paleo. I'm like, should I call it something else? And just so people know, I just came home from the gym, so I'm a little amped up and I'm tripping over some of my words. My adrenaline's still a little bit high. But anyway, I'm not somebody who's like, I am paleo, I am this. I'm not going to identify myself with a way of eating that then labels me as that. So I won't even say like I am keto or whatever it is, because then it leaves people this opportunity to jump all over you and criticize if one day you're eating carbs or like, I just can't. I'm not a religious person and I'm not dogmatic about nutrition. I just don't think that really serves people in the long term. And what I've seen in the last decade, I think what it does is serve to stress people out more. I think it's really important to educate people on the benefits of different ways of eating, help them see what can help them with their own health and their goals, et cetera, and let them make an informed decision. Don't tell them what's best for them. Really empower them and let them see that they are capable of figuring out what's best for themselves. And so to your point, I was eating keto when I wrote Practical Paleo, so much so that I finished the book and I looked at the recipes, or I was done with the recipes and I was like, oh, I don't really have a lot of carbs in here. I should probably go back and add some carbs, because people are always asking, where can I get carbs on paleo? And I actually had a blog post about it probably a decade ago, paleo carb sources, because people were confused about, people were accidentally going low carb when they didn't really mean to. But it was something that I had been doing since probably late 2010. I talk about it in the intro to Keto QuickStart, which I know we'll talk about, but I have a fit day log because I logged all my food at the time. Counting carbs was tricky in the beginning. And that's what I was doing. And I really found that I felt good eating that way. And people did talk about low carb. There were a few people on the scene talking about it. Rob Wolf definitely talked about it a long time ago. But not a lot of people were talking about it. And for sure, people weren't asking about it. And so I just kind of laid low with it. And I have not eaten keto exclusively since then. I've definitely gone through a lot of different things. I just like to try things too and see how it works for me. I've done a lower fat, slightly higher carb, like macros, I'm saying like air quotes, sort of a macros program. And I learned a lot from that. And I actually took some of what I learned from that and applied it to what I'm teaching in Keto QuickStart for people to use all of these tools that I've gained in the last 10 years to apply it to eating keto. But I don't think that somebody needs to stress out about, am I going to eat this way or that way? It's like, try it for a while, see how it works for you. Don't blame yourself if it's just not the right thing for you. But I think people start to get scared. And I find that that's a bit of it's a religious mindset. My secret obsession is learning about Scientology, so we don't have to talk about it on the show. But like, I really have been obsessed with learning how people sort of self-brainwash and get so convinced. And I just wrote a blog post recently about being in ketosis is the only way to burn body fat. Like, that's a huge myth that somehow in the last 2 years now people are thinking that that's the truth. I'm like, y'all remember Jane Fonda was burning fat, back in the 80s or whatever. This is not the only way to burn fat. And I'll break it down for you. But I really want people to know the truth. And I want them to know that I'm not here to sell them on keto. I'm here to support them if they're interested and curious and want to do it. I'm going to support them in a healthy way and give them the facts. But I don't really care if somebody comes to me and is like, well, you used to teach this. And I just don't, I'm not really fazed by that type of thing. If anybody gets accusatory about it, if somebody's confused, I tell them about my, history and my path with this whole thing. and help to clarify that. And I do clarify it in the intro to Keto QuickStart because I want people to understand like what my personal journey has been. But I'm not really concerned with what people might think about if I teach this or that, because the foundation of all of these things I'm teaching is actually very much the same with little tweaks here and there.
Yeah, and I think that I've had a similar experience going through the gamut of being known for paleo stuff and then being the keto guy. And then even this last year, I did carnivore diet just to see what it was all about for 4 weeks. And then I was a carnivore guy for a while. And then going back to keto, I got a bunch of backlash. You're like, what? You're eating sprouts and avocado?
Yeah.
Like, I thought
it's more what other people want. Like, I think that people in general, and because we have similar personalities, which makes me laugh because my husband always jokes about how a lot of people he becomes friends with, we all have this similar personality that's not like him at all.
Right.
But I think other people want a guru more than we want to be a guru. We're just interested and curious and trying things, learning all we can, helping people understand what we're learning. And when somebody wants a guru, like I can't help you that you want a guru. I'm just not going to be that person.
Right. And I think that there's a foundational element to some of this stuff where, as we talked about, you're talking about the same thing. And like, even though I try a lot of different things, and I think that I have now a bunch of different tools in my toolbox, ketogenic diet is one of them for fat loss, et cetera. I think that one of the biggest things about why I love that you're coming out with this is that foundationally, like we need to be eating real food. And I think that there's stuff that there are tools that lie on top of that, high carb, low carb, different macros here or there, timing, fasting, whatever. But I think that fundamentally you can't ignore that you need to be starting with real food first. And I think that's never going to change, in my opinion. Like you can't argue that.
And to your point too about trying different things, one thing I've considered in the last 6 months to a year that I think is important for everybody to, I don't know, just kind of like file away in your brain. I think it's helpful to try different ways of eating, a whole variety of them, because what if one day there's something going on with your health? And like, what if your kidneys what if you do have kidney disease and you actually do have trouble processing more protein? It would be great if you knew how to eat a higher fat diet and less protein. Like, I just actually think it's education. And as you move through different phases of your life, it would be great to know. Or what if your, family member is diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and they're curious about keto, but you've never tried it. And so you actually struggle to help them know how to do it. You don't know who to point them to. You haven't kind of looked into it. It's just a sort of, I don't know, it's sort of like a human body experiment where once you've done something for about 30 days, 2 months, 3 months, you're pretty well versed in how to do it. Like, it's not that hard to tell someone else, oh yeah, here's what you can do. Swap these things out. Here's a different way to eat pasta. And I just think that that's an education that's worth having, learning how to fuel the human body in various different ways, and finding out what works for you is great. But I also just think there's a cool element to knowing, if you don't need to eat gluten-free, for example, but if you've done it for a while and then somebody you know is diagnosed with celiac, cool, you know how to do it. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can become a reference for somebody. And as much as folks like, you and I can write a book or a blog post, yes, we have some authority out there and people trust us. Social proof and peer-to-peer education is still always the strongest influencer of getting somebody to do something different, like because their friend did it, their sister, whoever. That really influences people strongly. So if you're listening and you're like, yeah, but I didn't write a book, I don't have a blog, you're actually influencing more people. And so being able to point them to folks like me or Anthony really helps, because it gives them this extra sense of credibility. But you just doing it and having the experience, that social proof, is actually a stronger, more compelling reason for them to try it.
Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing point. And I think that one of the things that you said, like, you accumulate skills and tools over the course of the year. And I think that one of the things I wanted to chat about was, I mean, you've been doing this for a very long time. What has changed your mind, or what have you learned to maybe refine your approach for yourself? Not necessarily for everybody else, but that you learned, okay, if I do a ketogenic diet this way, it's better for me as an individual.
I have a really unpopular opinion on this, which is fine with me. There are a lot of people for whom, so look, fat loss is probably the number one reason most people want to eat keto. I think that the biggest benefits of being in ketosis are actually different from fat loss. I think that I have a lot to say about all of this. I think the mental clarity, the sustained energy, the appetite suppression, which help fat loss become easier. I think those are some of the greatest benefits of being in ketosis. And there's a lot of people for whom low fat, high carb feels really uncomfortable. Raising my hand over here. It's stressful. It's stressful to eat 5 to 7 times a day. You know, those little meals, it's a pain in the butt. And eating keto, higher fat, whatever it's going to be in this sense, it gives a lot of relief to a lot of people who have struggled with dieting over the years because it's so painful. Do you know what I mean? It's like this, and I don't know if you've ever been overweight. I don't know your whole story. Were you ever overweight?
Yeah, I was super overweight when I was younger. And that's one of the things that, I mean, I learned to deal with a lot through that, but yeah.
So that's the thing is like those of us who have, and I was probably, I don't know, about 25 to 35. I can't really tell. I don't know how much I weigh right now, but considerably heavier after I graduated college. And those of us who've gone through losing weight, there's this feeling of stress and anxiety whenever you get hungry. That's like, I need to eat. Is what I'm going to eat now going to contribute to satiety and also help me lose weight? Like that is this crazy place to be. And so what I have learned is for those of us, especially who know how to cook and who make really yummy food, switching to keto or eating keto, higher fat, I consider it slightly higher protein for the approach that I take. Super low carb, just doing that alone for many people is not enough. For a lot of people, it works great. And I think the more weight you have to lose, the easier it is to just kind of go keto and it'll be effective and you don't have to really micromanage. For people who are more in, I would say, the 10 to 20 pound, I would like to lose 10 pounds, 15, 20 pound range, and just free eating keto is not working for you. This is the myth that I was kind of alluding to earlier. Just eating keto isn't going to magically make you lose body fat. You still need to get to a place where your body is looking to burn what's stored. And this is where the number one thing I have found is effective for me, and I hate it, but it's true, is tracking. I have to be accountable for what I'm eating. And to that point, I found a way to track that feels, I don't do it all the time. So I'm just saying this. This is just if I'm like, okay, I really think, I can gain weight very easily. It's not easy to lose weight, but I can gain 10 pounds very easily. I make good food. I can eat it. But I found a way to track that helps you see everything that's kind of left for the day instead of this sense of adding up what you ate and feeling like you're scared to eat more. I think that's a place a lot of people get to where they're like, I don't know, like I'm at 1,200. Should I stop? Because I've heard that number before. What I do, and I have this in Keto QuickStart because I've talked about it for a long time with people. And I did learn this from my macros days, right? When it was lower fat. But I learned this approach where I call it a bingo sheet. And I give people a map. I tell you how to calculate roughly how many calories. This is not to like the micromanagement 10 calorie range because you can never know exactly how many calories are in your food, but it's a target. And it's a target to identify how much energy your body needs. It's really not the calories, but whatever. We have to assign something to it. And I show people, here's all the food I want you to eat today. And what people will find is if they're still feeling hungry at the end of the day, they probably didn't eat all the protein I asked them to eat that day. And if they really have eaten everything that's on that sheet, then go ahead and grab some more protein and veggies, green veggies, or, a little bit of fat. I don't want people adding. So this is like my really unpopular opinion, like adding tons of fat to the day, adding fat bombs, it's not going to help you lose body fat.
Drives me nuts.
Because now you're giving your body the thing that you were trying to get it to tap into. And so I really talk about that in this book. I'm like, here's how you do it. And it's kind of hard I hate to tell people, but like that's the truth. I do need you to watch how much you eat. I don't want you to be starving, but I know for sure that if I track and I'm accountable to let's say it's around for me, I'm 5'4". I don't know how much I weigh, but like an ideal weight for me is around 140 pounds. I'm athletic. So if I'm at that weight, I don't think I'm at that weight right now. I might be a little bit heavier. But book stress and it happens. I really don't know, but I know that around 1,600 calories in a day if I'm not working out, and 1,800 to 2,000 if I am training that day, I know that that is like going to feel good for me. I'll be satiated if I'm eating the right balance of foods, if I'm eating a good amount of protein. Like I know that based on calculations, I know that based on having done it. And so if I hold myself accountable to that, again, those of us who have had this experience of like gaining or losing weight over the years, we know that there are times when we reach for food because we're tired or we're bored or we're stressed and we're not really hungry. And what being accountable to, I just call it a daily tracker, but it's like a Savvy Keto daily tracker. And I'll tell you what Savvy Keto is in a minute. But I find that being able to just cross it off, be like, this is what I ate, cross it off. Okay, what's left? Like it just gives you this mental freedom. Some people get crazy tracking. I find it to be liberating, although I don't do it all the time, as I said. But if I'm doing it, I do feel that it's the most effective thing. So that was a long answer, but I want people to know that if tracking what you're eating is effective for you, I don't want you to feel badly because there are people for whom not counting and just eating keto is really effective. It's different for everyone. And I think the people who eat to live versus live to eat can do better without the tracking. But for those of us who live to eat, I do think that accountability is really the most helpful thing. And look, accountability is helpful in a lot of areas of our lives. So, it is what it is.
Yeah. And I think that it's just another tool. Like tracking is another tool that really may or may not work for some people. It works for me really well when I kind of get down to it and portion out my food and have everything there. I mean, same thing. And what you touched on, I don't care if both of us are unpopular, but I mean, overeating and just guzzling down fat and MCT oil because you're in a state of ketosis is like, it's generally not going to get anybody but an endurance athlete where they want to be. And that's kind of the truth of it. Like those people need to choke down.
Or somebody who needs to gain weight.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at that point, it can be challenging, but if your goal is just generally to, feel good and look good, and you have a few pounds to drop, like you said, maybe even the 10, 20 range or above that, like that's not a great path. And associating ketogenic diet, which could be a good tool if done properly, it's just being misused at that point. And so you mentioned your Savvy approach, which I actually am in love with, and I'm going to start recommending this to as many people as possible. But can you just kind of go through that acronym and what that means and how you came up with that?
Sure. So what's so funny is after years of writing books, I always joke that I have so much I want to tell people, and I often struggle with creating a framework that really keeps it simple because I'm like, but it's not simple. There's context. And then there's this, So I just kind of sat down and I was like, well, let me think about how I want people to build their plate. And once I had that fleshed out, I was like, okay, this is what it's going to be. And okay, it's a little bit of a stretch on the last word, but it's fine. Everyone will get it. Okay. So it's Savvy, Savvy. I want you to start with protein. So that's the S. Make sure there's adequate fat.
So I'm gonna stop you there and jump in and say, okay, a lot of people are afraid of protein on a ketogenic diet, and I love that you start with the protein. And this is my recommendation always as well, is that like you must hit that. And I think a lot of problems that people have is they tremendously undereat protein on a ketogenic diet. So maybe you just touch on that for a second.
Well, so I am not in keto groups. First of all, I'm not a joiner. So I'm like not in all these, like, I don't know, there's Facebook groups, there's people sharing information. I'm like, whatever they want to say is fine. But I've heard so many things, so many stories of people being unsuccessful. And I'm like, tell me what you're eating. And they're eating 80% fat. They're scared of protein because they think it's going to kick them out of ketosis. And I'm like, listen, you're misunderstanding ketosis. You're misunderstanding that to get into ketosis, you need to not have glucose coming in. But then the idea of gluconeogenesis, people think that by eating protein, they're going to have so much sugar in their bloodstream. Chris Masterjohn, who, he's like, I think he basically is the least dogmatic. He's like, here's what the science says. Years ago, I was listening to him talk about gluconeogenesis, and he's like, the amount of glucose that your body is going to convert from protein is so small. Like, it's just the amount that your body needs for some critical functions. It's not going to give you this situation where it's kicking you out of ketosis. And I'm sure you found this experience on carnivore. I haven't read everything that you've written, but like, I don't know how it would be possible to not be in ketosis when you're not eating.
No, it totally. I mean, same level of ketosis, and I mean, people don't realize that you make just about the same amount of glucose from the glycerol backbone of a triglyceride. So fat. And when you mobilize fat, you actually make, roughly, it's like 80% the amount of glucose. So it's like you eat unlimited fat. Does it? Yeah. I don't know. It's this very simple biochemical thing.
It's a safety net. It's a physiological safety net, right? It's like our body can make what it needs from these various nutrients. And obviously there's no essential carbohydrate because our body can make what it needs in terms of a glucose demand from protein and fat if it needs to, but it's not going to spike your blood sugar and it's not going to kick you out of ketosis. So I think that's a thing that people find is a big myth. And also, frankly, we know this. It's actually way easier to eat a ton more fat than it is to eat a ton more protein. It's cheaper. It can be more delicious, but it's not going to be effective. And like every single bodybuilder, every single person who's ever built muscle will tell you, we need you eating protein. And so if somebody doesn't want to lose muscle, doesn't want to lower their metabolic rate over time, you need protein for that. And, if you want to eat plant-based, I'm not your girl. So for as much as I'm like, I'll tell you these different ways to do things, I mean, I let lightning strike me. I am sure I will never write a vegan book. Like, I just don't believe in that approach. I don't think it's optimal for human health. I can talk about why another time, but there are things that the human body needs that you're not getting from plants.
And I think, there's that. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think we kind of hit at an intersection of the keto thing, of the myth of gluconeogenesis, but also this fear about IGF-1 and mTOR that's going to kill you and you're only going to live till you're 40 years old. But I mean, I digress. We could go on forever about that. Like you said,
I don't talk about that stuff in my book. I talk about gluconeogenesis, but my book, Keto QuickStart, is really for, honestly, anybody who's eating keto and who's done it for a while. Great. You'll have recipes. You will learn something from the front of the book. I promise you'll learn at least something. But it's really for like your friends, your parents, your coworkers, whoever it is that is like curious about keto and doesn't know how to even start. I promise this book is like the least intimidating. I give just enough science because, I have to explain how the stuff's working, but that's kind of what I'm always known for, is making it really easy to understand. And I don't take it to those next levels where I'm like, I've been doing this for a decade. People don't really need to know that. And in fact, too much information, I've watched it stop people before they start.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I listened to an aunt of mine tell me how she was like, I don't know how I'm going to add enough fat to my meal. So she wasn't even starting keto because she was so nervous or scared of how to do it. I'm like, listen, whoever told you that was wrong, first of all. I'm like, you don't actually need to add that much. So let me go through Savvy Keto then. So starting with protein, just making sure there's adequate fat on the plate. This is another one that people go really awry. They're like dumping 4 tablespoons of olive oil. And I'm like, that's almost 500 extra calories on your plate. Again, it's not just a calories game, but at some point you have to limit that if you're really trying to lose body fat. Start with protein, adequate fat, veggies, then variety. And that really does apply to both proteins and veggies. I want people to mix it up. You can keep it consistent for a while if that's easier for you. I'm not going to tell you you're doing it wrong if you're always eating like steak and broccoli or whatever it is. But over time, just getting a variety of nutrients in is a good idea. Organ meats, what have you. And then the last one is Y, and that's yes to herbs and spices. So a little bit of stretch on that letter Y.
I like it.
But it's yes to herbs and spices because I think, and I would recommend this to somebody who is eating carnivore too, honestly. And I don't know if you have this take, but I think herbs and spices are super underrated. One of the reasons why I obviously started, a spice company, besides other reasons, that goes back to my meal business too. But I think we can get a ton of nutrition from our spices if they're high quality, if they're pretty fresh, if they're organic. And then herbs are super potent micronutrients, phytochemicals, really great for helping us to naturally detox. Cilantro is known to be a natural heavy metal chelation agent. So, getting in those herbs and spices, especially fresh herbs too, chives. I don't like parsley, but if you do, parsley, all of that stuff, basil, really micronutrient rich. And obviously I consider those to be free. Like you're not spiking your glucose with a pile of cilantro.
Yeah.
So,
and not only that, like you said, it's almost like a cheat mode to be able to make your food amazing. And so if you're changing the way you're eating and you're cooking differently, a lot of times that can be a struggle for people. But if they add tons of herbs and spices, okay, now the meal's incredible. And now you'll eat, and stick to this and have more of a maintenance with it.
You won't even know. And like the way I cook, excuse me, and the recipes in this book, no one who doesn't eat keto would feel like this is keto food. And that's a really big thing for me. Like it's really important that this is not weird looking, you just kind of like quote keto-fied this. And to your point about herbs and spices, I made these hidden veggie ranch burgers in the book, and they're made with ground chicken. And I am notoriously not a ground poultry person. Ground turkey to me is like turkey bacon and ground turkey can go somewhere and die and like never surface again. I just think that they are culinary abominations. I can't even talk. I told you it's my adrenaline. Culinary abominations. But that being said, that might have been a little harsh. Using ground chicken thigh, which is a little bit fattier, of course, and you can actually pulse boneless, skinless chicken thighs in your food processor and actually grind it yourself if you want, if you can't find it. But I'm using some grated zucchini that you squeeze out the water. So you're getting a little bit of vegetable content there, but not a ton. Tons of fresh chives. I'm using my ranch spice blend, fresh parsley again, if you like parsley, grated lemon zest. I'm really into using citrus zest. It's super flavorful, super packed with micronutrients, and then some salt. And those burgers are so amazing, but there's almost nothing to it. Do you know what I mean? It's just a handful of ingredients and tons of spices and herbs. Yeah.
And another thing that, that approach is incredible. I love it. I think it's super concise, and I think it touches, like you said, it's a simple framework that actually includes so much stuff there. And then I know you are kind of touching on a lot of other different strategies that people can hone in on. And one of them I wanted to chat about, which I've never actually heard before, so I want to get your take on it, is the seed cycling for hormones with women. So if you could just break that down and go over that, I think it would be super educational.
Yeah. So, and this is something that lots of different naturopaths and functional medicine doctors are really savvy on, to use that word again. And Dr. Jolene Brighton, I've had her on my podcast a few times as she's been on. People are like obsessed with these topics. But for women, and I'm sure you do too, we get a lot of questions about keto for women, dealing with different hormonal imbalances. And understanding that the omega-3, omega-6 fatty acid profile in the foods that you're eating can actually influence your hormones. They can influence the symptoms that you're having. And I actually learned about this. Again, I probably learned about this almost a decade ago originally. I think Rob Wolf was talking about it a long time ago, not necessarily using the expression seed cycling, but he was talking about, or whoever it was I was listening to, talking about using things like borage oil and evening primrose oil in a counterbalance to things like eating omega-3s in your fatty cold water fish, or getting some potentially from nuts and seeds. And so just getting this balance. And we always hear that omega-6s are like a negative, pro-inflammatory, but there are some times that actually getting this healthy source of fresh omega-6 can be beneficial. And that's the nature of seed cycling, is where we take the female cycle, and during the first half of the cycle, which is the follicular phase, from the first day through the 14th or whatever day you're ovulating. And so for some women who might not have a period, you would do it from day 1 to day 14, and you can follow the moon cycles. I can't give you all the details on that, but like that's basically, you're supposed to follow the moon if you don't have a cycle, which is really common. And you add 2 tablespoons of whole or freshly ground pumpkin or flax seeds to your meals for the first half of your cycle. And those will contain nutrients like magnesium, B vitamins, omega-3s. All of those support healthy estrogen levels, which is required for that phase of menstruation. And then during the second half of your cycle, which is the luteal phase, You would add 2 tablespoons of whole or freshly ground sunflower and sesame seeds to your meals. And those seeds are rich in zinc, vitamin E, and omega-6 fatty acids, which will naturally support healthy progesterone levels required for that phase. And so we do want to have those as fresh as possible. You know, you might buy raw seeds. They're sealed in a bag. When you open them, keep them in the fridge. If you can grind them freshly, that's ideal. Sometimes I'll just put things like that on a salad whole and just make sure I'm really chewing well. But with seeds, and especially sesame seeds, since they're so tiny, it's actually hard to kind of break them open and get everything out of them. A great example, and this is not covered in Keto QuickStart, but it's in Practical Paleo. We actually use whole white sesame seeds to test your transit time, which is the time from when you eat until it's eliminated, or that bolus of stuff, fiber, and whatever else is actually eliminated. And so that's a perfect example of how something like sesame seeds, you can eat them, like maybe you have them on some sushi and you'll see them in the toilet unless they're ground up and really, fine for you to get to them. So chia seeds would be the same way. Great source of insoluble fiber because you're not going to digest it. But if you grind it up, then you can actually make what's in there more bioavailable.
Any tips, hot tips for the guys out there, or just only love for the ladies?
This is for the ladies.
Only for the ladies.
This one's only for the ladies.
Shucks.
Yeah. Sorry about that, but sorry, not sorry.
One more thing before we wrap up is your experience. I did the same thing maybe 6 months ago, and I haven't really gone back. And switching from coffee to matcha and tea, and this is something that I've actually tried it a few times, even last week. Crazy schedule, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go for a cold brew today. And yeah, I was wired for like 4.5 hours and got a lot of work done, but I felt like a zombie, like I was gonna pass out in the second half of the day. So maybe just I don't know if you've always been a matcha fan, if it's something that you started doing more recently, and your approach to that on a maybe daily basis or whatever it is.
So what happened was I was on a book tour. Last year, it was January, I released a 21-day Sugar Detox daily guide. I was in a hotel, had my cold brew sitting in the fridge, poured myself a glass, and my body was running such high adrenaline. I think it was super early in the morning. I think this was before I was going to do a TV spot in Washington, D.C. It was like an early morning media appearance. And I had this cup of iced coffee poured. I took one sip and my body was like, oh, hell no. Like it was literally my body. I mean, I think we all know that nervous energy feeling. Mm-hmm. And before going on a super early morning TV show, I'm not nervous, but there's just something about like getting there on time and just, I don't know. It's just, you never know what you're walking into. It's just a crazy experience. So my adrenaline was running super high. And I had come off of, the previous however many months of working on the book, which it's just always a high stress time. I don't want it to be, but I care that the books are great. I care that they give people what they need. The more you care about something, the more stressful it is. It's just what happens. And so I think my body was just rebelling, and I literally just quit coffee in that moment. I was like, no more coffee. And I've done this many times, and I'm never going to say like, I'll never drink coffee again, because I'll get to that in a second. But I just knew, I was like, this is not working for me. I can't take any more of this. And my energy level when I'm on tour, like I love touring. It's my favorite thing. I love meeting people. I actually love traveling for it. I push the limits of what my publisher wants me to do for how many events. And I'll be out there. So you guys are listening, come see me on tour. But my body was just saying no. Okay. And I don't remember how long it took me. Actually, now I do remember. I got to the end of the tour. I was in Austin. You live in Austin now?
Yep.
So I was at Picnic.
Got it.
And one of the women on my team who lives in Texas, and she had come to meet up with us, she ordered a matcha latte of some sort, coconut milk or something. And it came to the table. I think it had sweetener in it, and she was doing the 21-day Sugar Detox, and I wasn't. And I was like, whatever, I can have a little bit. I know what my body can handle. And I was like, let me try it. I haven't had matcha ever. I feel like I would like it. I like green tea. This sounds like a good idea. That's literally what it was. So I had my first matcha latte at Picnic in Austin, which sounds so fancy. Like their drinks are pretty amazing. And I was like, wow, that felt good. I felt like I got a little sense of being awake, but I didn't have that crash side that you were talking about, because I definitely get that. And so that was probably at the end of January that I tried matcha. And until probably, I don't know, it was maybe 6 to 8 months later, I didn't even really reintroduce much coffee. I had maybe had a decaf here and there sometime 4 to 5 months later. And then now I've had coffee now and then. I actually had some this morning. I don't know. I actually had one of your mocha keto coffees. It's delicious. And I don't know. I have it now and then now, but not every day. And I just really enjoy matcha. I don't get that same crash feeling from matcha. And my sleep quality is definitely better. I think whatever's happening with the half-life of the caffeine from coffee. I remember when I was much younger, I used to go out to a coffee shop in the evening and I would drink coffee and I would go to bed at night. And now I'm not that person. I mean, I can go to bed, but I think my sleep will be more interrupted if I've had coffee during the day. And so it's just a really good reminder to pay attention to that stuff, because some people think, well, I have it in the morning, it's not affecting my sleep, but it is good to just track, like, what was your sleep quality? And it's worth trying just to know, because again, that doesn't mean I'm never going to drink it now, but just like we were saying with diet earlier, at least I have the information. I can make an informed decision, even if it's not the best decision for myself every day. But now I do mix coffee in probably a few times a week, and most often not in the morning, but I dabble with it again, just because I do enjoy it. I love the taste of it. But I'm very aware of how it affects my sleep, my adrenals, and I try not to do it when I'm in a very high stress state.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things when I was working with people one-on-one a lot back when I was in San Francisco at my clinic is that people couldn't handle it when they were kind of in the thick of things at work or whatever. But when they had drink coffee, for instance, when they're on vacation, they felt totally fine. And I think that I've just been sprinting for a very long period of time, and so right now it's not a good addition for me. But I mean, hopefully things will cool down somewhat soon. We can do that. Speaking of book tours and being in Austin, I looked at your dates and was just jumping right over us.
I don't know. I had been there a couple of years in a row, and honestly, like, the last turnout that I had was okay. And look, if you're listening and you were there, thank you. But sometimes when it's a repeat spot, it's a numbers game. And I'm like, if not enough people came to the last event. So that's why every event that I do, I'm like, really show up. If you're RSVPing or you're interested, come to the event, because that's how people will choose where they're going to go next. Like, I will go somewhere over and over again if people are consistently really showing up. Even if it's like, I was just there last year, it doesn't matter. If people are in the room, then I'll be there. So it was like, okay. And I just was like, I don't know, I'm just going to skip it this time. So we'll see. I would love to go everywhere, but people give me limits, which I can't stand. But I would literally do like a 40 city tour if I had my choice.
Of course you would.
So yeah, I love it. It's the best.
All right, Dan.
But yeah, I'll be in Dallas and Houston. So
yeah. And so, your tour is what, how many, 16, 20 cities, something like that? Or
It's a lot of cities. You know what? I'll rattle them off, because if you guys are listening and you want to come learn, you want to check out the book, if I'm going to be in your city, I would love to meet you. And you can check out the dates. Just go to balancedbites.com/tour, or you can find me on Instagram at Diane Sanfilippo, and I have tour information there. But throughout the month of January and into February, and then I do have a couple of, I have one March date, but San Francisco, Orange County, Huntington Beach, Boca Raton, Dallas, Houston, LA, Seattle, Portland, Washington, D.C., Charlotte, North Carolina, Las Vegas, Denver, Kansas City, and Phoenix. Those are the cities that are on the tour at this point.
You heard it, folks. Show up, vote with your time.
Come meet me.
Awesome. So Keto QuickStart, about to hit shelves. Anywhere else people can find you? You said your Instagram, balancedbites.com. What else?
Balancedbites.com. So the book is available everywhere. It releases January 1st, but it's available if today is not January 1st yet, but it'll be in all bookstores, in Target and in Costco. So feel free to support it anywhere you love to shop. But yeah, you guys can come find me, Balanced Bites podcast for sure. If you love podcasts, which I imagine you do, I think you would love the show. And just Instagram and my website, my emails, all that good stuff. Come find me.
Thank you so much, Dan. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Keto Answers podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, but even if you didn't, I would love a review. Just go over to iTunes, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and pop in a review so we can get found by more people, get better guests, and have the information that you need. So please go to iTunes, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and leave us a review. And if you're new to keto, head on over to perfectketo.com/podcast and enter your email for all our top tips and guides on getting started with the ketogenic diet. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.